done over Teams. So Mandy, do you want to call the roll?
Yep. Mr. Constant?
Here.
Ms. Kennedy?
Here.
Miss Allard? Mr. Perez Verdia?
Here.
Ms. Quinn Davidson? Ms. Salatel? Mr. Rivera?
Present.
Mr. Dunbar?
Here.
Mr. Peterson?
Present.
Mr. Weddleton?
Here.
Ms. LaFrance? Chair, you have a quorum.
Okay, and I see in the text that Jamie Allard is here. If she missed that. It's okay, so we have agenda in front of us. Does anybody have any changes? Okay, not hearing any. So introductions, we did the roll call. Who else is on participating via Teams?
This is John Redden with Great Northern Cannabis.
And then Jana Weltzine, and I also have David Shoup representing, or for Jana Weltzine representing Enlighten Alaska and Alaska Sense. And David, do you want to?
Yes, I represent Egamo Properties with regard to the portion of your agenda that is paragraph 2C, Enlighten Alaska Extractions.
Jan and Dave, are you on by telephone or are you on part of Teams?
We're on Teams. David's here in my office, and so I put my name on the people list. You can see it's Jana Weltzine and David Shoup.
Okay. Okay, anyone else?
Hi, this is Jason Brandeis. I'm also with Great Northern Cannabis.
Major John Brackenbury with the Salvation Army via phone.
Eugene Haberman.
Captain Denise Delgado with the Salvation Army on the phone.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that last name. Who was that last speaker? I didn't catch that.
Captain Denise Delgado.
Okay.
And
Okay.
through the chair, if there's anyone else on the phone that would like to speak, to unmute yourselves, we kind of are periodically going through and muting just so there's not background noise. If there's an item you would like to speak to, you can hit *6 on your phone to unmute yourself.
And with any speaker, identify yourself when you start speaking for the sake of posterity. So do you want to go through then, Mandy, on how, did you have more to say about how you manage the meeting on your end?
No, that's going to be it. If you have, if you're on Teams and you would like to be in the queue, you can use the chat phone, just unmute yourself and let the chairs know that you would like to speak. And then they'll put you in the queue.
Okay, well, first thing is 2A, Alaska Sense Quarterly Compliance Review. So Rich Fern, I thought I saw you on there. Are you there?
Sure.
Or Jack Frost?
Jack should be on here also.
Yes,
Okay,
we're both.
Okay, just for the record, Assemblywoman Zalatel is with us now. So do you want to give a quick report on Alaska Sense?
We had one issue so far this year. It was an odor issue. Long story short, it was the filters needed attention. We wrote a citation to Miss Warder, Miss Yeltsin. They quite promptly took care of the odor issue. We haven't had a problem since.
Okay. Any comments from the committee? Chris, Chris, did you want to speak?
I do.
Go ahead.
Just briefly, I did receive personally one call complaining about odor, and this was probably right around that February timeline. And so I just am glad to hear that it got cleared up, and I hope that they continue, because I do have people who live nearby who decide I'm the one they need to call.
All right, thanks, Chris. Anyone else?
Mr. Chair, this is Richard. We do have the folks at the Berry Street Maintenance Shop. They will call us if they detect an odor problem, and we have not got a call from them since February there.
Oh, okay. It's okay. Well, that's good news then. Okay, any other comments from the committee? Is there anyone here from the public on this issue?
Jana Weltzine, attorney for Alaska Sense. I don't have anything to add, just here for questions, and I agree with enforcement's or code enforcement's report.
Okay. All right, moving on. 2B regards a transfer of ownership cultivation license M10299 and manufacturing license M10301 Great Northern Cannabis from RC Tinderbox. And we had there's an article in the paper that kind of generated some concerns on that. And then I think, do we have Jane Sawyer online somewhere from the AMCO? Oh, okay. So Ms. Sawyer, I wonder, can you tell us the status of this at AMCO?
Thank you. This is Jane with the alcohol. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, sorry. This is Jane with the Alcohol and Marijuana Control Office. The only thing that I can say right now is that this is an open investigation, and that I am here to listen to any concerns you have relating to this. And if there is anything that you want me to relate to our enforcement section, I will.
What are you investigating?
What you read on the paper.
Okay. And what's your timeline?
I have not heard back from our enforcement supervisor about this. I emailed him yesterday, but he hasn't been able to get back to me. I'm not sure what the timeline is. I will write that down, probably get more info, and I can let Mandy know about this, and she can forward it to you guys.
So regarding the license and so the transfer, is that impacted by your investigation at all?
We don't know. I don't know very much at all about the investigation. I'm not generally privy to investigations.
Okay, so the fact that it's being investigated doesn't necessarily have an immediate impact then?
No.
Mr. Welton,
okay.
This is Constant.
Yeah, go ahead. Chris, can you cue yourself like through text or through the chat? I mean, it's fine. I'll call on you just as a general thing. I'll try to do it that way. So go ahead, Chris.
I would really appreciate for us to hear from the applicant.
Yeah, is there someone here who would speak for Great Northern Cannabis?
Yes.
John Redden?
Yeah, this is John Redden. So as Ms. Preston Sawyer already said, there's an ongoing open investigation with AMCO. We're diligently complying and participating in that, as well as conducting our own investigation and internal investigation into the matter. At the present time, the entire sitting board of Great Northern Cannabis was previously voted out by the shareholder body. The CEO, the COO, and the vice president have all been removed, and the organization has cut ties with them. And we're diligently looking into this. As far as the transfer of the applications are concerned, we've received nothing from AMCO that suggests that the approval that was pending a submission of a final fingerprint card of one of our 26 shareholders was in question at this moment. And so it's our understanding that that application is still approved with delegation for that matter. So that's our understanding of the current circumstance, and I'm happy to answer any other questions that the body might have.
In delegation to who?
In delegation to the director pending the submission of that final fingerprint card.
Okay, good. Chris, go ahead.
Thanks, John. So, clearly there's been lots of hubbub and sermon drawn on this, and we are faced with the challenge of the question of, shall we transfer this license? Shall we allow the transfer of this license? We have our own local process, and this is our communication to the state. So how would you recommend or propose that we move forward with this, recognizing that we have a duty to the community to ensure fidelity to the code and to public safety practices? What's your recommendation for us?
That's an interesting question. It's not one that I was necessarily considered having asked of me, but I guess I would suggest that at least in the short term, that the city take into consideration the ongoing investigation of the state of Alaska, as well as the immediate remedies that Great Northern has taken among itself in order to deal with these allegations. We have Great Northern is kind of uniquely situated in that there's some 26 individuals that own a part of a corporation or a business. And so it's not, well, at least at the moment, and in the future, it doesn't look like it's being run exclusively by just the, I guess there's an elected body that is in leadership of the organization. And at this point, I think Great Northern has demonstrated in the past that, and we would like to demonstrate in the future that we have a strong appreciation, and we feel it very important to follow regulations and to be compliant. Our motto is 100% compliance 100% of the time, and it sounds like potentially that may have fallen short at some point in the past. But that doesn't. That's still our goal day to day, and that's my understanding of sort of, not my understanding, but that's what we're attempting to sort of address at this moment. And so I guess I would ask that the city and the state both take sort of recognition that this is an organization owned by a large group of people that don't play in the day-to-day operations of the business, and that upon recognizing that there was a problem with the leadership, they took swift action in order to remedy that, so that they could be an organization that was regulatory compliant and did take the best interests of the community at heart in the decisions that it made.
So, John, I have another question, if you don't mind, both Johns.
Go ahead.
Can you describe for us, as best you can, the actual problem that occurred?
I believe that the allegation, as described, is that there was a tampering of the testing of a specific batch of cannabis. And
can you just help us to understand the scale and scope, so we have that for our record?
Yeah, it seems that the allegation is limited to some point approximately a year ago, apparently for and I'm not sure the scope, but it seems to be the allegation relates to a single instance of some testing that was related to cannabis that was grown at the RC Tinderbox facility.
Right, and just in the sense of how much we're talking about, like, because the challenge we face, I believe, is that there's potentially been great profit on an action that was not fully legal, certainly not compliant if it is found to be true. And we are being asked effectively to transfer this license. And the transfer of this license to an organization that you just really described as a whole bunch of people that have a little tiny part that could look like then nobody is responsible. So I'm trying to get a sense of the scale of this issue so we can understand where we need to proceed in our analysis.
Well, I would say that the organization is responsible, right? So, I mean, as far as individual responsibility, I think, everyone plays a part, potentially. I mean, to the extent that any investor is responsible for the actions of their investment instrument that they've decided to put money into, I mean, they can vote their equity, and they can influence the leadership. So, a penalty of the corporation or of the business is a penalty to the individual. So I think it's sort of it's unfair to say that and at the moment a penalty from AMCO could result in a suspension of a license or a financial penalty or any sort of other penalty that may result in some financial hardship for the company. So to say that the shareholders or the owners in the company don't have aren't going to feel a penalty or to feel some recompense for the potentially placing someone in leadership that should not have been, I think that's inadequate. I think that are not inadequate. I think it's sort of like misses the point that I think that they will feel that. Yeah, I guess that's kind of my point there.
Thanks. I'll have more questions after other people have had theirs asked.
All right, thanks. Pete, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And my question is, and according to the newspaper article, we're talking about 100 pounds of product. I find it hard to believe that you could sell 100 pounds of product with mold on it and not get any complaints from the customers. So I'm wondering if someone from Great Northern, did you get negative feedback from customers about this?
No, not at the time. I think there has been. It seems like there has been. I've not heard anything. We did not receive any consumer reports at the time about poor product or poor cannabis. So it seems like, and it's unclear based on both the article that has been referenced. It seems unclear as to the suggestions of what amount of product may have been was untested. So or how much product was what was part of this amount of these batches that were tampered with. So we didn't have any feedback at the time of any consumer problems with our product. Typically, we have very, very good customer feedback about the product that we're providing. So I don't have any specific examples of public outcry for the product that we were delivering to them. And I will say, it seems like based on the allegations that there were concerns, potentially there were concerns for mold, but I don't, obviously there's no, my understanding is that oftentimes the mold is visible. Great Northern Cannabis does not have a history of having moldy products, so that's not, but we don't have, there was no visible, to my understanding, there was no visible mold on any of the product that was in the inventory at that time. So that's, I guess that's about all that I can offer.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, there are other questions from committee members?
I do, if no one else is.
Go ahead, Chris. And Jason Brand, I see you asking to be in the queue. Are you, do you represent Great Northern or RC Tinderbox?
Yes, I'm the attorney for Great Northern Cannabis.
Okay, and John Redden, what's your role?
I'm general counsel. I'm the in-house attorney, and Jason Brandeis is one of our external counsels.
I'll be glad to wait.
So Chris, would you like to ask something, kind of, are your questions directed at both of them then?
I would rather hear what Jason has to say first, and then I'll ask my question.
Okay, Jason, go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, Jason Brandeis for Great Northern Cannabis. I just wanted to follow up on a couple of the points that were made. And the first is sort of procedural, and you know, the timing of this is certainly interesting, that this the story about these allegations came out right while the Muni is considering this transfer application. But I think it's important to remember that ultimately an entity needs 2 licenses to be able to operate. So with the state license is required, as well as the Muni special land use permit and license. So should this body, or should the assembly ultimately approve the transfer of the license, AMCO still has the ultimate authority to permit that operation. The license transfer is in delegated status, which means that the state entity is waiting for certain things to be completed, including the approval of the Muni license. It's waiting for fingerprints from one of the shareholders, and any other procedural things that need to be considered. They certainly could delay approving that or hold off on final approval of that pending the outcome of the investigation. So I think in terms of the question about how Great Northern would like to see this body proceed, we think that the requirements of the Muni code have been met, and we'd like to see the license transfer go through. There certainly is a big concern for protection of public health and safety, and that is at the core of the marijuana licensing regulations. And that issue gets to the point that John brought up about sort of the unique structure of Great Northern Cannabis. Great Northern is, I think, the biggest cannabis company in Anchorage, if not the state, simply in terms of size of its ownership and its employees. But that size does not mean that the owners are just a bunch of people with no responsibility. This is a corporation, and what that means is that the shareholders vote on a body who will be in charge of the company, and then the board of directors appoints corporate officers to run the day-to-day operations. That's different than a lot of the smaller cannabis companies in the municipality, where you have 3 or 4 members of a limited liability company. The owners are the same people that are in the stores, that are in the cultivation facilities, that are running things day to day. There's really no separation between the operations and the ownership in those places. With Great Northern, there's pretty big separation between the ownership and the day-to-day operations. And in this case, the ownership, once they learned of these issues, took immediate and swift steps to remove the people from the positions who were making those day-to-day decisions and who were involved in these allegations. So the entity itself is ultimately responsible for the actions of its employees. But in this case, they've taken pretty immediate and drastic steps to address those concerns and make sure that the entity can be and will continue to be compliant with the regulations.
All right, thanks, Jason. Chris?
Yeah, thanks. I'm very cognizant of the the issue of where we are. This is a transfer, not a license, but there are a number of questions that relate to the license. Then if this process goes through, then it becomes another question. And so I think I have two questions, one that's for staff. Mandy, are you in the room, or Dean? The question would be, does this license, if approved, this transfer, then fall into that time period where it's kind of automatically extended to the next licensing period? You know, if we get too close to August 31st?
Through the chair, this is Mandy, Honest. So that only qualifies for the new licenses being issued if they are approved by the assembly but not effective. So for the transfer, it doesn't affect the expiration date of the license. It would still have to be renewed for this coming year.
So that effectively means the question of their renewal will be back before us sometime in the next 60 days or so.
That's correct.
So that's very helpful information for me. And then the question that I have, this could be for John or Jason, it really ultimately doesn't matter. It's a philosophical question, I believe. So you have touted, it has been touted and is proven, in my opinion, that you are either the biggest or one of the biggest and certainly the highest profile organization in the field in Alaska. And the timing is weird, I will give you that, Jason. I didn't even know we had a license when I first heard about all of this. It came to me separate from the license question. But then the license came up and here we are. And so the question I have is, what actions should we take to ensure that we communicate to all of the other licensees in the field that it's not a free-for-all? That if you can get away with it, then you got away with it, as opposed to we have a compliant field and we want people to participate and follow the rules. What motivation do people have to follow the rules if you can, you know, if according to the article, you know, able to sell tons and tons, not tons, but, you know, pounds and pounds of products for great profit? What message does that communicate? And how do we ensure that other licensees don't get this belief that they should just try to get away with whatever they can?
Yeah, that's a very good question. This is Jason Brandeis. I can handle that. And
go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question, and I think this ultimately gets to you know, a question of enforcement, right? I mean, if people know there are not going to be consequences for violating laws or rules, then there's really no point in having those laws and rules. In this particular case, I would say that we don't know what the violation is, if any, at this point, right? And I'm trying not to sound too lawyerly here, but we have an allegation and we have an ongoing investigation. So I think certainly depending on what comes out of that investigation, if it's found that all of these allegations are true, then the state licensing body, AMCO, will certainly take some action, as would this body. You know, we've seen previous actors have gotten in trouble before. You know, a good example of that is when there have been complaints of you know, entities that have had problems with odor issues in the municipality, or where there were questions about waste disposal, or you know, marijuana being discovered on the grounds outside of certain facilities. The Muni has taken a hard look at those entities, as has the state. They've been given an opportunity to correct those problems, and then their actions were constantly reviewed and looked at to make sure that they're complying. So what I would say ultimately is that, you know, the rules are there to protect the public. The rules are there for the organizations to comply with, so that they know what they're expected to do, and they should be given an opportunity first, you know, to have their due process rights protected and let the investigation play out, and then look at what is proven through the investigation and figure out what the appropriate penalty is, or what the appropriate approach is to inspire compliance from other members of the industry, and to ensure that that actor is also compliant.
So I think, Jason, that you really framed that perfectly to my opinion, and I'll just restate what I think I heard, and that is that just due process is moving forward. This is a transfer. We have the relicensing coming up. The investigation is ongoing, and until such a time as there is a finding of fact, there is really nothing to act on that we would be out of line if we did. But once that time comes, then we should sit down and have a meaningful conversation about what would be reasonable should findings of fact prove that there were criminal activities or non-compliant activities. I think that's actually a very wise approach.
All right, thank you, Chris. Does anyone else on the committee have a question or comment? Pausing for everyone. I've got a question for either John Redden or Jason. Just what we have is a transfer of a license, and I think in the concept most of us have carried as we've done this code is there would be a sale proposed, and then a license would be transferred, and once that license is transferred, then the purchasing company takes control. But it appears from the storyline here, whatever the details are, is that sometime up to a year ago, GNC kind of took over operations of RC Tinderbox to some extent. I mean, that even you would have knowledge that there's some large amount of marijuana there that may or may not have mold. And I kind of went through the timeline in the Daily News article, and there were statements that about a year ago, this event may have happened, but then in that time frame, in September and October, there were some NOVs, but Chris Usher responded to those, owner of RC Tinderbox. But then there's, the board, turned over your owners created a new board based on these allegations in April. So it really tells us GNC had strong operational control of RC Tinderbox well before this license transfer. So I guess, I don't know, is that true? Can you talk to the extent of it? And then if Dean or Mandy is there, I'd just like to say, what are our expectations in our code? Do we anticipate that would happen? So I guess start with Jason and John. Either one of you wants to speak to that. When did GNC take control of RC Tinderbox?
Thank you. This is Jason Brandeis. I can get started with the answer, and then I'll let John fill in the details. So what you're seeing is something that's somewhat common in the cannabis industry, which is that there are oftentimes when you might have consultants or people come in to you sort of hire a third party to come in and help out with your operations. RC Tinderbox and Great Northern Cannabis started discussing the possibility of a license transfer, and given the regulatory requirements for going through that process, it was going to take quite a while. So in the interim, they entered into an agreement whereby RC Tinderbox remained the owners and licensees of their facility, but Great Northern was tasked with sort of providing some staffing and sort of helping out with the day-to-day operations. And that's where these issues came up. And there were changes made within the Great Northern leadership because the people in Great Northern leadership allegedly were the people that were assisting with the RC Tinderbox facility. So you had some overlap in terms of who those people were. But RC Tinderbox, because the license has not transferred, is the owner of that entity and is still the licensee. And I think that John is probably in a better position to answer your questions about some of the specific dates.
Okay, Forrest, I see you in the queue. Do you want to ask now, or you want to wait for John Redden to speak?
I can wait after John.
Okay, John Redden, go ahead.
Yeah, this is John Redden with Great Northern Cannabis. So as Jason's described, we entered into actually two agreements. One was an agreement for the sale or the transfer of licenses pending approval by both the state of Alaska and the municipality of Anchorage. And part of the impetus of RC Tinderbox offering or putting, looking for someone to transfer their licenses to was a severe sense of financial distress and assistance that they required in the management of their facilities. And during that discussion, that sort of became clear, and it was unclear whether or not sort of the doors were going to stay open until the transfer happened, right? And so we entered into a management agreement in order to provide sort of services to the operation of the facility during that interim period, pending the transfer or the approval of the transfer of those licenses by both regulatory bodies.
Okay. Forrest, did you want to go?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
So I have a question. Let's assume, just for the sake of argument, that the allegations are true and that something like 100 pounds of cannabis product, and I believe it was RC Tinderbox's cannabis product, or grown at their facilities, was basically unusable because it contained mold. I'm still curious what the motive was. Again, assuming this is true and there were bad actors in Great Northern Cannabis, I'm trying to understand what their motive was. And perhaps it has to do with this timing issue. If you were in the process of purchasing RC Tinderbox, and presumably this is one of the assets, this very large quantity of cannabis is one of the assets that was being purchased, why not just, once you realized it was unusable, reduce your purchase price by that amount and, not go through this? I don't understand the sort of motive of why they did this. Again, assuming it's true. I wonder if either Jason or John could speak to that.
Forrest, or Mr. Dunbar, thank you. This is Jason Brandeis. I don't think it's a good idea for us to speculate on motive. And I would advise my client to not address hypotheticals under this situation. But I think that if what I could say is that what you're describing is certainly a very reasonable approach. If you're purchasing an asset and you learn that the asset has problems, you would renegotiate the purchase price. If the allegations in this case are true, it sounds like there was poor decision making being made, so that a normal, reasonable approach to renegotiating a transaction may not have been considered.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Jason. Chris, I see you in the queue. Can I jump to Dean?
Yes.
Okay, Dean, go ahead.
Thank you. I want to first make sure you can hear me.
You sound good, Dean.
Yeah. Oh, good. Yes, thank you. And listening to what the John and Jason have said and how they've stated things, you note that they say allegations, that these are allegations. And there's the investigation ongoing. So I would point out, trying to assume or look at facts that were alleged or that you read in the news article as some basis for maybe denying the transfer or adding conditions is somewhat not how due process should work when there's due process for the violations for selling, for example, the moldy cannabis and so forth. What the license transfer is about is the requirements we have for the application that are in code in 1080-045 and that require information on the transferees, who's obtaining the license, and that all the debts have been listed and provided to the licensee's creditors. And then there's also, as a matter of due process, the fact that the licensee and then agents or employees may be different. And as Mr. Brandeis stated earlier, they are in fact different for Great Northern Cannabis in terms of having shareholders and then management and employees. And we have in a suspension or revocation proceeding, which isn't what we're doing here, but there's code about that. For something as serious as these allegations that we've heard, there is some protection for licensees in 1080, 815 in our code, where the licensee must have at least been aware of what was going on, or endorsed the act of the agent or employee and did nothing to stop the action or activity. Also, that the licensee did not provide adequate training or supervision and so forth. And if the licensee did do those things, they didn't fail in that regard, then the licensee wouldn't have a suspension or revocation action. And so I just refer to that as sort of a comparison here if we deny a transfer based on agents and management, and not the actual license owners or the transferees for this license, then we might really be cutting off some due process that exists for this reason. And I think that the investigation that AMCO is conducting, and we should let that run its course before any of the, I guess, alleged actions are considered in terms of affecting the license. So we need to get the adjudication from, I guess, the investigation and the charges, and then if they're challenged, and if there's a hearing and so forth, and evidence, and then a decision, and that's what we rely on. We really need to wait for that to run its course. So I would just caution, we should acknowledge all this that's going on, yes, but I caution against relying on all these allegations in terms of the decision to approve or not the transfer.
All right, thank you, Dean. Chris?
Thanks. Yeah, two attorneys in the room, Jason and Dean, and I agree with them both. But I have a question, more of a technical question for the licensees. In Metric, can you track where these 100 pounds of product went?
This is John Redden with Great Northern Cannabis. You can track production batches from one location basically from seed to sale, right? But the key component of that is knowing the production batches that were in question. So to the extent that anyone has question about the either the authenticity or the where something originated from, or origination of a product, you can follow that from seed to sale.
Okay, so it can be, is what I just heard you say. What I think I heard you say. Okay, yeah, I have a bunch of questions about all of this. It seemed like there might have been two different kind of allegations buried within the allegations, and lots of questions, but I think for the practical purposes of our work, I am going to recommend that we approve this transfer. And in fact, I'm going to make that motion here at the committee. In order to respect the due process of all parties, we should allow the process to run its course.
Okay, is there a second on that?
I object.
Is that Crystal?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I just want to object to the idea of making the recommendation to move forward. If you want to take a vote on it, that's fine, but yeah, thank you.
I think with a motion, if he gets a second, then we should vote. So Chris moves the approval of both transfers. Is there a second on that?
Could you restate it? The barking dog is, I'm sorry.
Yep, sorry.
Kind of hitting the words. That's all right.
But there's the pounding of the pilings at the port's making her crazy. So the motion is to move forward with to support the transfer, recognizing that the due process has to run its course, and that's it essentially. This is not. Go ahead.
Your motion is you just move approval of the two transfers.
Yes, recognizing, of course, that we have issues ahead.
And then Pete, you seconded that?
Yes, I did.
Okay, and Meg, you have I guess Dean was in the, Dean, did you get the wording?
Hi, well, I just want to make sure the motion, if I caught the wording, this committee makes recommendations, so the motion would be to recommend approval. Is that right or not? That move to approve the licenses?
Yes, of course.
Of course.
Meg, go ahead.
So my question is, if we're concerned about the due process, wouldn't we just end up delaying this, even if it came before the body? Because aren't we awaiting the outcome of the due process procedures?
Is that to Dean?
Actually, for the timing, could we ask Miss Honest? We have a due date for action on this, correct?
That's correct for the comments that the municipality can make to the state's license transfer. So the deadline, if the assembly wants to protest the transfer of the state license, is this June 2nd meeting.
May I ask a follow-up, Mr.
And
Chair?
could I ask also?
I'll go Dean. Go ahead, Dean.
Sorry, and Mr. Honest, our templates are usually just waiving any action about the state's process, since we have our own license program and approval of our municipal license here. Do you, so I'm a little uncertain, well, first, the investigation and whatever penalties come out of that are a separate proceeding than the transfer. But I don't think that we would do any prejudice if the municipality simply waived any protest, as we normally do for all transfers and new licenses. But we can postpone our consideration of this transfer of the municipal license and take action on that later if the assembly felt more comfortable with that. And I think that that would all come together eventually.
Okay, so I think just to clarify real quick, and then Jamie, I'll go to you. So we have two actions then in this, each of these resolutions, and one is to waive protest on the state, and is the second one to also approve the municipal license transfer?
Through the
And
chair,
Dean
this
is-
is Mandy, that's correct.
Okay, and Dean is recommending that or letting us know that we could bifurcate that.
Sorry.
So we could waive the protest, but also postpone approval of the transfer of the city license, the Anchorage license. Is that correct?
If I may. So if we
Dean,
look
go
at the
ahead.
documents on the resolution, we have sections 1, which says the transfer of the municipal license is approved as long as the state's approval is also obtained. So we sort of wait and see what the state does under section 1 to determine if our municipal license is also approved. And then under section 3, we are waiting to ANCO, no objection to the transfer of the states. So it would be up to the state and whatever their investigation does, and the states make their own decision without our local input on whether the state should allow the transfer. You know, if the state doesn't transfer, section 1 means our municipal license doesn't transfer either. But if the state transfers, then our municipal license will transfer. So in a way, I think if we postpone action here, we simply let the time run on the notice to ANCO. And so section 3 becomes sort of nullified in a way. And since we postpone action past that deadline, and section 1 would simply be transferring the municipal license at some later date if we wanted to wait. So I think that would work out, although in an odd way.
Okay, thank you, Dean. Jamie, go ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So I guess my concern is that we're trying to move forward with licensing on this. And I understand due process, but I'm also very concerned because if this was, I'm just going to give a few examples here. If this was a meat company, if this was a baby food company, or any other type of company that had mold or any other type of contaminant was sold, I don't believe that we would be moving forward with saying, hey, let's go ahead and do this, and then we'll see what the outcome is. I find that very disheartening. And I find it concerning that we're moving forward with something. And I believe we need to wait to see what the investigation, because I don't know what we can do legally. I guess I'd have to investigate on that. Of if we move forward with all this, are you just saying that they're licensed and now they can sell marijuana and that there's no recourse to it other than maybe a fine? I mean, this is not okay. And I have a real moral issue with allowing a company to go forward with something when there are huge accusations and allegations out there. Yes, I understand their allegations, but we should not be moving forward with something until we actually know definitively what has happened. Because I honestly, even though the board has been fired or let go or removed, I don't have trust. And I don't think the public would have trust in hearing this. This is just not okay. Thank you, Mr. Weddleton.
Okay, and I want to, and that was appropriate. Thank you. We have a motion on the floor that we're discussing now. So, Forrest.
Yeah, I was wondering if Andy or anyone else has a sense of how long the state investigation is likely to take.
I think we hit that. Ms. Sawyer, are you still on?
Yes, through the chair, this is Jane. I don't have a timeline yet. I have been listening to your meeting and everybody's concerns, and I will push them forward to the director and the chief investigator. But I just don't have a timeline right now. I'm assuming, and I believe that once the investigation is concluded, we would bring a report to the board whether that's going to be to act on against the license or the licensee, or simply just a report of the findings.
All right, thank you. Does that help, Forrest? Do you have a follow-up?
Well, I think it is relevant to our decision of how long we delay it if we decide to delay it. But it does seem like there are some kind of unknowable unknowns out there for us, and that's unfortunate. But I'm not sure if there's anything we can do about it. If we could get even a general time frame, I think it would help us if we do decide to make a decision on how long to delay.
All right, thank
you. And sorry.
Go ahead, Ms. Sawyer.
And I will, as soon as we are done with this meeting, I will contact the director and the chief investigator and ask them to give me sort of a timeline, and I will email Jamie. Not Jamie. Is it Jamie? Mandy. I'm sorry, Mandy. Sorry, Mandy.
You could probably email Jamie too. She'll pass it on.
No. I was thinking about Jamie Hines, actually.
Oh, okay.
No, Mandy.
Chris, you're back in the queue.
Thanks. And I hear all of the moral arguments that are being made. There's another argument other than the most reasonable and resounding one, which is allow due process to work. But beyond that, actually, what this process does, if approved, is it actually consolidates the ownership to the parties that we hear and have before us, as opposed to having these other parties and this interestingly entangled licensure. And so there's another argument beyond due process, but let's clear the deck so we have only one entity that we're looking at in this conversation. And so I would offer that that's another reason for us to either get out of the way and let the transfer happen, or approve it, contingent, of course, on all of the further process we're going to have, which relates to the actual license renewal and continuation into the future. And to Mr. Dunbar's point about timing, I can assure you whatever time AMCO takes and then we take If it isn't to the benefit of this licensee, there's a very good chance it gets appealed to the Superior Court of the state of Alaska. And so from a timelines perspective, it could go a very long time. And so my argument is let's deal with the issue in front of us. Let's make it as clear as we can as we go forward, so that when we do make a decision, it's not muddied by all kinds of parties in all kinds of directions.
All right, thank you. I'm watching the clock a bit because we have another issue here. Meg, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I would like to just make sure whatever action we take, that the license comes back with before the before the body, once the state's process and investigation is complete. So whatever the right mechanics for that are, I don't know that the investigation, I think I tend to agree with Mr. Constant. I don't think that the investigation will affect the transfer of ownership, but whether or not there will be action taken against the license. And so if I'm not mistaken in my understanding of the situation, that's how I would like to proceed. And I'm not 100% clear on all of the mechanics, but I wanted to toss that out there.
All right, thank you. So we have a motion on the floor. We've had discussion. Anyone else in on this? Chris, you're back.
Yeah, just one last note that my thinking on the license renewal of August 31st is if the question remains open, then we do rely on our precedent in going forward, which is any kind of renewal of that license would have a shorter term and be contingent on satisfaction of the questions. And so we do have that power. That question will be back before us before August 31st by virtue of the code and reality. And so to Ms. Zolotov's point, yes, that will be within our powers to address very specifically like a laser.
How's it going, Kurt?
Time to mute someone. Okay, anything else from the committee? How do we vote on this thing, Mandy? Did you go through the list?
I can go through the list. That's probably the easiest way.
And to repeat, the motion is to approve the transfer of both licenses.
Okay. Okay, on the motion, Mr. Constant,
Yes.
Ms. Kennedy,
No.
Ms. Allard,
No.
Mr. Perez Verdia, Ms. Davidson.
Yes,
Oh, that was Mr.
Jumped
Peterson.
ahead.
that was, yeah, Mr. Peterson.
Okay. Ms. Quinn Davidson, Ms. Zalatel,
Yes.
Mr. Rivera. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm doing ones that are not on the committee. I apologize. Mr. Dunbar
Yes.
and Mr. Weddleton.
No.
Okay.
Is that all of us?
It is. So we actually have a tie.
Motion fails.
Could you, what was, I missed something on one of the thing. I have for Chris Constant, Pete Peterson, Meg Zolotel, Forrest Dunbar. No, Crystal Kennedy, Jamie Allard, myself, and who?
Forrest, Crystal, Jamie was no.
Mr. Dunbar was a yes.
I think it passes 4-3.
Yeah, I have 4-3.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I had Mr. Dunbar as a no. Okay, so I have Ms. Kennedy as a, or Mr. Constant as a yes, Ms. Kennedy as a no, Ms. Allard as a no, Ms. Quinn Davidson as a yes, Ms.
Is she
Zalatel
here?
as a-
Austin,
Oh,
are
that
you
was
here?
Mr. Peterson. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Mr. Peterson is a yes, Ms. Zalatel is a yes, Mr. Dunbar is a yes. So it is
Okay.
4-2.
3.
4-3.
4-3.
Okay, so we'll go forward at our meeting on Tuesday, and when we hit this, we can, the statement would be the Community Economic Development recommended approval of the, or transfer of the, approving the transfer of the licenses. Okay. I think we'll close that one out and move on to the next item. So next up is Resolution 2020-165, Guardian Lighten Alaska Greenery, new license, and AR 2020-166, Enlighten Alaska Extractions. And we had public hearing on this at our previous assembly meeting, and some concerns came up. One was Salvation Army concerns broadly with the operation in their neighborhood. Another one is ownership of the equipment concerns, and we listed perhaps there's other issues. And we moved this to this committee to hash out some of these issues. So here we are. For the people with Salvation Army and other listeners, typically these committee meetings are, as you've probably seen, is assembly members kind of have priority discussing the issue and presentations from staff and so on. And we'll give you some time to speak at the end, but it's not really a rehash of the public hearing, which I think particularly Salvation Army made pretty solid case of, or got your message across quite well at that. So we should have time, if we watch the clock closely, to have audience participation, and my intent is to give time for people to speak on that. So anyway, anyone from the committee want to kick this off?
Mr. Chair, this is Ms. Zalatel. Oh, I see Mr. Rivera is on. Perfect. Okay, great. That was mainly what I wanted to make sure of, because I know he had requested this opportunity.
Okay, Felix.
Thank you, Mr. So a couple of questions, sort of two different topics, and I just want to state at the beginning on the record that the issue regarding the equipment is not one of the issues that I am interested in raising. I've been convinced by our attorneys that that is a separate and civil issue, separate from the action that we have before us. So the two issues I want to bring up is first is talking about future development, and in the context of this, but also in a broader context, I'd like to hear both from staff as well as the applicant, and want to bring to light sort of two things. First, we know that very close to where this applicant is going to be located, potentially, there is going to be some significant development on 48th and Cordova. And then there is, in the next few years, likely going to be development on a lot owned by Providence Hospital. So in short, there is potential for this few blocks to look very different in the next 3 to 5 years. And I would say that's, short term. How is this handled or considered during the application process? And again, I'd like to hear first from staff, and then second, would like to get thoughts from the applicant.
Mandy or Dean?
Through the chair, this is Mandy Honest. The applications are done based off of current status. So and I believe Ryan is on the phone, and so he can talk about the process for the land use permit and the how they go about that if needed, but it's based off of what's currently there. And if there isn't any protected uses there presently, that's not counted against them. They would be considered kind of grandfathered in should something come after the fact.
Yeah, and through the chair, this is Ryan Yell. Yeah, Mandy is 100% correct on that. So planning's analysis is examining compliance with Title 21 standards, but along with that, we do also take a look at the zoning in the area. This particular area is all zoned I-1, at least in that immediate corridor. So it's an industrial use going into an industrial area, which is appropriate. And Mandy is again correct that a protected land use can preclude a marijuana establishment from moving in, but a marijuana establishment cannot preclude a protected land use from moving in. And then also development plans in the area, we are aware of those. It gets tough because plans can fall through, and we have seen that numerous times. So, of course, you want to stick to any comprehensive plans or neighborhood plans or district plans that we have, and we absolutely do that. But if it's a private development plan, it's difficult for us to hold up a development that is ready and willing to go in for one that is simply planned.
All right, thank you, Ryan. Felix, did you want to follow up?
No follow-ups on staff's response. I think that makes sense to me, and I wouldn't want to hold an applicant accountable for what may or may not be happening in the future. But I would like to hear from the applicant, if things do change significantly in the neighborhood in the future, how they may react to that.
Through the chair.
Is that Ms. Welting?
Yes, through the chair. Thank you for giving us a chance to address these issues. I know it's been kind of difficult to communicate given the technological stuff that we have to deal with right now. So this group has been very, very mindful of the fact that, especially given on Tuesday nights, all of the Salvation Army's concerns and all the wonderful work that they do. And honestly, Enlighten Alaska just wants to support Salvation Army. So they've really taken a hard look at their filtration system and beefing that up, and working with the building safety division at the Muni to make sure that their odor control system is going to be top notch. And they've also looked at other facilities to get some learning lessons from other facilities that have had struggles with odor. And so I think we're going to be very mindful of that issue. Also, this facility is never going to be a retail. So you don't ever have to worry about that. It's never going to be retail. It's not going to have advertising signage. It's not going to say, big bold letters, Enlighten Alaska cultivation or Enlighten Alaska manufacturing. It's not going to have any of those things. It's going to be pretty much, you won't know it's there. And I really encourage, Salvation Army to work with us into creating kind of a phone tree system. So if there is any smell issues, if there is any of those kinds of problems, that we can nip it, in the bud within 24 hours and get it situated, get it settled, because that's not the kind of business Enlighten Alaska has been in Spenard since 2016, and it's not the kind of business Enlighten Alaska will be. I did want to highlight a few things. We were taken by surprise on Tuesday at the Tuesday night meeting because, we mailed out mailers to 500 feet within the facility as the code requires for a community meeting on December 17th. And we didn't have anybody show up from Salvation Army. We did have one gentleman show up and voice concerns about smell. And so we documented that in the community meeting report, but we didn't have any Salvation Army input. And so we were surprised by that. And we also did newspaper ads September 5th, September 12th, September 19th of 2019. And we didn't get any comments from Salvation Army during that advertisement or from the public posting that was posted from September 21st to October 1st, or at the MCB control board meeting where both licenses were approved by the Marijuana Control Board. So, we kind of felt like we got kind of hit late in the game on this, and we didn't get a chance to respond on Tuesday, but we listened really hard to all the concerns. We took lots of notes, and we're definitely making that a priority to address any of those smell concerns that might negatively impact the Salvation Army's operations. They are outside of the 500 as pedestrian route required buffer zone and the 200-foot as the crow flies. And so, Enlighten Alaska is a family-owned business. They are Alaskan-owned completely. It's Jane and her two kids, Evan and Leah, who are on the phone, and so they can add they would like to any other points on this, but we've really focused on making sure that our smell system is not going to be a problem. And we really encourage Salvation Army to work with us, get our cell phone numbers, and let's create a phone tree. And if there's an issue, we're going to fix it. And so we just hope that the Assembly can trust this business, as it has been a great operator. It never has had a notice of violation. So I just wanted to put that out there, and happy to answer questions.
All right, thank you. Meg?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So it's never going to become a retail. Is there some limitation, legal limitation, that would prevent that from being the case, based either on location or the fact that I have to be refreshed on what can be co-located with what? But can someone just refresh if it's if that's in fact the case?
Yeah. To Mandy and Brian.
Through the chair, this is Ryan. There's no Title 21 standard that prohibits a marijuana retail facility going into an I-1 district.
And through the chair, this is Jana Weltzine.
Oh, go ahead.
So Meg, to answer your question, there's not enough parking at the facility, and the neighbors that also rent from the same landlord has, made it really clear to the landlord that they wouldn't appreciate a retail. So that's just not something that this building or this business plan has been addressed by, and the owners have no intention of putting a retail here.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a quick follow-up?
Yeah, go ahead.
Is it possible for us to put as a condition that there could never be a retail here? Could we do that without there actually being an application for retail? Could we just limit either through the special land use permit or the license somehow to just take care of that issue?
Dean, can you address that? Someone knock on a table for Dean.
Okay, I got my mic now. I think that really retail is this whole separate license, and that you would probably address it to deny it at that time if it's ever proposed. I didn't hear of any plans to do so, so the condition there, I guess, would be a little presumptive, and you would get to address a retail license application if it ever comes before you. So I don't know that such condition really, to me, it doesn't make very much sense.
Through the chair, this is Jana Weltzine.
Let me see real quick. Go ahead. So we got Felix or Chris. Do you want to hear from Ms. Weltzine first, or?
I can wait.
Okay, Ms. Weltzine, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I can't speak for the landlord, whether the landlord would want that condition placed on their building permanently, but I can speak for Enlighten Alaska and say that they would consent to that for their particular operations.
All right, thank you. Felix?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. By and large, Ms. Weltzine addressed the second line of questions I had regarding neighborhood concerns. I did miss one detail, though, that I wanted to follow up on. So, Ms. Weltzine, what was the community meeting that was held, and when was that held?
The community meeting was held on December 17th, 2019, and they held it at the facility. During this time period, it's really hard for community councils to meet during the holiday season. So I think that was kind of the reason why it was held at the facility. And also, for these facilities that are these big production facilities and not necessarily as retail, community members kind of like to see, okay, what are you really going to do with this space? And so we like to have meetings at the facility and have the diagrams there so we can show them, like, hey, this is our plan, this is what we're thinking, this is where the exhaust is going to be, what do you think about that? And so we can get some real good input. Like I said, we had 3 people other than the applicants show up, and they did note they were concerned about odor controls, and they do know that there's a coffee roaster nearby that kind of affects the area, and so they just wanted to make sure that we were going to maintain the commitment and the obligation to follow state and union law to control odor. So odor was brought up at that meeting.
All right, thank you. Felix, follow up?
Yeah, thank you. for that. So I understand why you wouldn't take this to the Midtown Community Council so late in the holiday season. I guess in general, in the future, the more that folks can be proactive about reaching out to neighborhood institutions, I think that would be helpful. But otherwise, thank you, Ms. Weltzing, for the response.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. Chris, you're in the queue.
Yeah, thanks. So the applicant's counsel states that they don't have a problem with some kind of a language that implies or states or directs that there won't be a retail license. Isn't that something that we could add into the AM that accompanies the license that just states that the applicant agrees that there won't be a retail license? And then that way we as a body communicate to ourselves some years down the road, and that is part of the record so that the neighborhood could refer back to that commitment in the case that that's made. And that way we don't put it on the land use permit, which affects the landowner, but instead on this license, we just do that. Is that reasonable, Dean?
Go ahead, Dean.
Yes, well, regardless of what I said before, I think that it's pretty harmless to add it as a numbered condition in the resolution if you wanted to. I mean, if the body wanted to. And I guess that's, it sounds like the applicants and Lightning Council don't seem to object to something like that being added. You could add it to the resolution rather than AM. You could state it on the record. That's all fine. I think it's harmless. Just not necessary.
All right. Thank you. Okay, so we're at 10:18. We got, that was good, Felix. I think you kicked off a good broad issue there. So regarding the ownership of equipment, and that was the long pointed discussion at our regular assembly meeting. Does anyone on the committee have some thoughts on that?
You know, Mr. Chair, hold on.
Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just restate that I don't know, and at least since I've been on the body, I don't know before, but I don't believe so. Have we ever contemplated personal property as part of a license? And so it just seems to me that this whole line of reasoning is well outside of the scope of what we're being asked to do. And it would be an abrogation, I think, of our duties to move into civil law like this.
All right, thank you. Anyone else on the committee? Dean, you shared some thoughts on the relevance of the equipment ownership. Would you like to just address that a bit?
Yes, sure. So I did review again the comments we had from Mr. Michael Morgan, who claimed that they had seized his equipment unfairly by the landlord of the building. And I did review the letter from David Shoup, attorney for the landlord. And I did obtain copies of a couple court orders in their civil case. Generally, though, it is mainly a contractual civil dispute between private parties. And for our role in the license and approving a license at this location where there previously was an operation, our role is basically for manufacturing to approve the manufacturing process and the products that are going to be manufactured. And I guess, our inspectors or the state's inspectors, when they look, they just make sure that this equipment is appropriate for that manufacturing process. But other than that, yeah, we don't, I think, have any reason to get involved or attach conditions to the ownership of the personal property here. That will get resolved through the contractual dispute that I have currently in court between Eximo and Turnian.
All right, thank you, Dean. Crystal, you're in the queue. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. you know, I guess I am still conflicted over this idea of whether or not we can actually approve a license for something that's in this much turmoil legally. So even though you may say, somebody could say that we don't normally like approve equipment specifically or have much to do with the ownership of the equipment, it just muddies the waters enough that it makes it really difficult to say that we're going to bless this operation, so to speak, when the operation itself may not be in a position to actually even be allowed to ask for that blessing, so to speak. So I think I would rather see something like this be resolved before we make the move of removing the protest. So I would just rather see this delayed till that's actually decided, so that the muni in some way, shape, or form doesn't end up in the middle of some kind of legal argument where we could possibly even be used as leverage against one or the other because of our ability to grant the license. So I'm still wrestling with this, but I'm not comfortable in moving it forward. So thank you.
All right, thanks. Pete, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this is something that hasn't happened before. I've been on the committee since the beginning, and it's unfortunate, but looking at the economy we have now, this may be something that happens maybe more often going forward. Hopefully not, but it's certainly a possibility. And so whatever we decide here might end up being precedent setting in one way or another. But this dispute over the equipment could drag on for a very long time. So, thanks.
All right, thanks, Pete. So Dean is in the queue, and also Meg. Meg, do you want to defer to Dean and then speak, or?
Sure, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Dean.
Yes, I wanted to add one thing. Our approval of the license doesn't mean they get start manufacturing tomorrow, right? We all know that. And I'm not intimately familiar with our inspection process, but there will be certificates of inspection required by, I think, our health department, maybe the state. Mandy, I think you know more about that, or Ryan. So just in terms of what Ms. Kennedy said, there would be some time when the inspection takes place and whatever equipment is there to manufacture their products is going to be used, would be looked at and said this is good by the inspectors. I believe that that's what will happen, regardless of the civil dispute going on. And then thirdly, I think that if the government bases our decision on that private claim and dispute, we really are prejudicing the landlord who needs to collect rent and so forth. Well, actually, no, let me back up. We're probably not. Never mind. That's it.
All right. Thank you, Dean. Meg?
Yeah, so Dean kind of made the point. I don't want us wading into the civil dispute because there will be lots of civil disputes that could come up with these licenses multiple times, and they have their own routes to take. The license proceeds independently, and then folks have their civil remedies in the courts that they could seek to, possibly enjoin the operation or other things, depending on whatever those facts and circumstances are. I don't think those have anything to do with the license itself. Our criteria is set forth for us. So did we have a motion or make a recommendation coming out of this committee?
We have not, but that would not be inappropriate for someone to make such a motion. It's 10:25.
Yeah, I move that we go ahead and recommend approval.
So would that be of both licenses?
Yes.
Okay,
Second.
so that's Meg, Pete. Okay, any discussion?
I have some.
Forrest, go ahead.
Yeah, so there was talk about amending either the AM or perhaps the resolution in some way to prohibit or indicate that we wanted to prohibit retail on the, at this location in the future. And so I'm wondering if there's some way, if we want to continue with that, and if so, like I would support a motion that said approve with that kind of amendment.
And I would amend my motion to do what Mr. Dunbar just said.
If I might.
Let's clarify this. So, I mean, Forrest could essentially be making a motion to amend the.
Right. If I might, it's order.
Okay, go ahead, Chris, on a point of order.
Yeah, I'm hoping that we can laser in on what we're talking about amending first, as opposed to make an amendment and then figure out what we amended to. I want to make sure we don't amend the special land use permit documents. And so if those are before us in any way, we shouldn't, because that attaches to the property and the property owner as opposed to the operator. And so if we're going to make this amendment, let's make sure we're making it to the proper document, which would be the licensing documents.
Okay, thank you.
So
we have a motion to approve them, and then Forrest, you're recommending a amendment to that motion that would amend the conditions of the license then.
Sure, I haven't made a motion to amend though, and I think that the mover, Ms. Zolotel, is open to doing that on her own with the help of the second. But I agree with Mr. Constant that we should, and I'm sure Ms. Zolotel agrees too, that we should be specific about what it is that we are doing when we do that. I guess I think I disagree with Mr. Constant though. Why not make it run with the land? Because the concerns of the neighborhood, and the Midtown representatives could speak to this better, but the concerns of the neighborhood aren't attached to this operator, they're attached to this property. And I mean, I suppose the argument would be, well, maybe Salvation Army and the other people in the area will move out at some point. That's certainly true. But again, if the operator changes, I don't think that the neighbors, as currently configured, want retail going in there.
If I might, Mr. Chairman, the queue.
We can. I feel a little better if we had more of a motion here and then address it as a motion. Can we do that? So Meg, were you?
So I would. Oh, sorry, go ahead. If someone else was about to speak.
Mr. Chair, this is Mandy. I was just going to let the chairs know we're coming up on 10:30 and see if they wanted to extend.
Move to extend 10 minutes.
Second.
Any opposition? Okay, 10 minutes till 10:40. So go ahead, Meg.
Thank you. So I would move to amend the. I actually have a question first before I make the motion. And that is, no, I move to amend the license to include the condition that there be no retail. And I would rely on Dean to ultimately help us with the appropriate language. That's the motion. As a condition of suggesting approval.
This is the second. I approve of that amendment.
Okay, thank you. Dean, go ahead.
Yes, I wanted to mention, I think that whether it's retail, cultivation, manufacturing, that's the type of land use, and I think it's really appropriate to put into the section on land use conditions. And then to respond to Ms. Zolotel, I think that the wording would simply be retail sales of marijuana or retail sales marijuana establishment shall not be allowed at this location. But actually, Mr. Yell probably has some boilerplate language for something like that. And then I would add, even if that's added to the special land use permit for marijuana, and in future's ownership changes and they want to try an open retail, it's a matter of applying for a modification to the special land use permit to remove that condition.
Okay. Ryan Yell, do you have any comments on that?
Through the chair, this is Ryan. I guess I don't at this point. I guess I would. I know Dean's looking at me for some advice on this, but I guess I would look at Dean because I'm so confused on placing further restrictions on this when we only have a manufacturing and cultivation before us. I don't know how we could amend either of those to preclude retail.
Okay, Chris, go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. The problem that I'm seeing now is that we are de facto expanding the protected uses in the neighborhood. We're literally taking that section of the code that is established for separation distances and all those other things and extending them just by fiat onto this license and this location. And it's problematic to me. I would prefer more of a statement of policy as opposed to some kind of a stern restriction, especially on the land use permit, because again, that goes with the land, not with the license. And so to me, this is a problematic area. We are bending the code in a way that is, I don't think, right.
Okay. Meg, did you want to address, Dean had suggested, you'd said add a condition to the license. Dean has suggested it's better with the special land use permit.
And that was my question, but I wanted to put the motion out there so we can have a clear motion. My question was pretty much answered, and I think some of my concerns about putting it on the special land use permit are alleviated with the owner, if it changes ownerships of the land, being able to subsequently seek a modification due to some change in circumstance or whatever may exist at the time. So I think Dean's advice is sound, and I think that's what I would prefer. But we could also just speak for sake of time, proceed with what we've heard with the license. We haven't been able to hear from the current landowner. And then someone, if they were so inclined, could bring that condition onto the special land use permit separately Tuesday without a recommendation out of the committee.
So are you changing your motion then?
No, in the interest of time, just to move forward as is right now.
So we have a motion now, move to approve the both licenses with amendments to the special land use permits. I'm sorry, with amendments to the licenses, that condition that says there would be no retail at this location. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Any more discussion on that, looking at the clock, folks? Okay, hearing none. So Mandy, do you want to do a roll call vote?
Sure. And so I apologize. I got some people that weren't on the committee for the last one, so I made a list for this one, so this will go smoother. Mr. Weddleton?
No.
Ms. Kennedy?
No.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Constant?
Yes.
Mr. Dunbar?
Yes.
Ms. Salatel?
Yes.
Ms. Quinn Davidson? Okay,
Absent.
that passes.
Okay,
4 to
so
2.
that is 4 to 2.
I didn't
Okay.
vote.
Oh, I'm sorry, who was missed?
Miss Allard.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. No.
Is she, are you on the committee?
Oh, I apologize. No, I apologize.
Okay, but you're welcome to join us. We can add you to the, I suppose, is that, I don't know, is that up to the chair? Perhaps Felix, talk to Felix. So. Okay, so we'll go forward on Tuesday with a recommendation to approve with amendments to the licenses with the condition that there's no retail. Okay, so ongoing business, I think we're done with this topic. Now it says other issues. Is there anything else in our few minutes? Okay, we just have a few minutes. Ongoing business, nothing. Old business, nothing. Audience participation. Can you handle that, Mandy? How that?
So if there's anyone in the audience that would like to speak, you can hit *6 to unmute yourself. Just state your name and what the topic is. And Mr. Chair, if you want to put them in an order as they go through, I can read off the phone numbers that I have listed and see if they want to speak.
Does that work, or can people unmute and then, and knowing we have about 1 minute, or we have 4 minutes, and we typically give people 3, so maybe you could cut your comments to 1 if someone wishes to speak.
This is Major Brackenbury with the Salvation Army.
Okay, go ahead.
I would just like to address a couple of things. I know you had already voted, but I think in light of the question about why we weren't available at some of the other meetings, it's because the building is sparsely populated due to the fact that it's been damaged and there aren't people in there, as well as the fact that the meeting that they did have was December 17th, in which we were very busy with providing Christmas for hundreds of residents of the city. That being said, our biggest concern is what the future holds with regards to that location. I know you discussed it. I'm happy to hear that there may be prevention of allowing retail outlet at that location. But just because that's said, just because it's legal doesn't mean that it's advisable. The Salvation Army has been in that location for 40 years, and it's a lot easier for a marijuana growing cultivation center to be able to find another location to go to than it is for a drug and alcohol rehabilitation center. That is why we have been at that location for 40 years. Trying to get the right zoning, variances, and public support to be able to move a location like that, it takes years to do, lots of money and lots of time. We have been working hard to try to end homelessness in this city by taking care of individuals' drug and alcohol issues, which is the reason why we see the number of people on the streets. We've been working with the city in order to be able to make that happen and to increase our bed capacity in order to help the city deal with that issue. While we know that we can't change what is legally happening right now in the city and in the state, again, just because it's legal doesn't mean it's advisable to be allowing a cultivation center to be plopped right next to a drug and alcohol rehabilitation center. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, Eugene Haberman.
Go ahead, Mr. Haberman.
My name is Eugene Carl Haberman. My email address is eugene@mtaonline.net. Phone number 907-632-9449. I couldn't help but notice, by the way, I live in Metro. I couldn't help but notice on item 2C, you said no public comment. And you put the public comment with a very limited time of 1 minute in audience participation. And you only had about 2 more minutes in the meeting. But the scenario on 2C is you had the applicant speak, and you should have had a fairness of the public to speak. There was an unbalanced scenario of that scenario, and especially when this item went back to you into committee from the last regular Anchorage Assembly meeting with the concerns raised by the Salvation Army and others. Now, as you know, I don't deal with taking a side of one and the other, but I look at fairness. And what happened here is significantly when so much of those comments were addressed at the regular Assembly meeting, there should have been a fairness and opportunity for the public to be addressing those concerns at the committee before it went back to the regular Assembly meeting. That ends my comments because of the limited amount of time. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Haberman. Anyone else in the few seconds remaining? Okay, hearing no one. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Move to adjourn.
All right, thanks, everyone.